"Get your hands off my child, who do you think you are?" the mother shouted, yanking her daughter away from the black woman trying to save her. Moments earlier, that same woman had been told she didn't belong in the VIP lounge. Someone asked if she was the cleaning staff. Another wondered if she got in by mistake. No one knew her name. No one cared to ask. Until a child collapsed and she was the only one who knew what to do. This isn't just a story about judgment. It's about staying calm when you're looked down on and rising anyway. If this story made you stop for a second, hit the like button, maybe subscribe. For more real stories like this, and let us know in the comments, where are you watching from and what part hit you the hardest? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Cassandra Bell stepped into the polished marble lobby of the Skylux International Terminal, her heels clicking rhythmically as she guided her 6-year-old daughter Layla through the bustling airport. The lounge loomed just ahead, vintage embossed in gold lettering across the frosted glass doors. Cassandra, dressed in a simple navy blue blouse tucked into cream slacks, looked every bit the composed professional. Her natural curls were pulled into a neat bun, and a sleek leather satchel hung from her shoulder. Layla clutched her mother's hand, eyes wide in awe at the chandeliers, velvet ropes, and silent elegance of the VIP lounge beyond. Cassandra offered a polite smile to the hostess at the reception podium. "Hi, I have a reservation under Cassandra Bell. First-class ticket on flight 482 to Zurich." The woman behind the counter, pale skin, strawberry blonde bob, name tag, Marcy, barely looked up from her tablet. Her smile was taut. Her eyes flicked to Layla, then back to Cassandra, pausing for a beat too long. "Ma'am," she said cautiously, "are you certain you're in the right place?" Cassandra's smile didn't waver. She pulled out her reservation and slid it gently across the counter. "Yes, I believe I am." Marcy looked at the pass, glanced back up with an almost imperceptible wrinkle in her brow. "I'll need to verify this with my supervisor." Her voice was smooth but coated in caution. Cassandra knew that tone, the micro pause, the microaggression, the polite suspicion wrapped in professional etiquette. Behind them, a woman in a pearl gray pantsuit leaned down to whisper to her teenage daughter. Her words were hushed but clear enough to hear. "That's why we work hard, sweetheart, so we don't end up like that." She didn't even try to mask the direction of her gaze. Cassandra's jaw tightened, but her voice remained gentle. "Layla," she said, kneeling beside her daughter. "Do you know what grace means?" Layla shook her head. "It's staying kind even when people aren't." Layla nodded, her small hand gripping tighter around Cassandra's fingers. Moments later, Marcy returned, feigning politeness. "It's all verified, ma'am. Please, follow me." As Cassandra and Layla entered the lounge, the room went quieter, not silent, but perceptibly different. Conversations dipped in tone, eyes followed them. A man in a linen blazer raised his brows. A woman in a floral scarf narrowed her eyes. Cassandra guided Layla to a corner table by the window, where the light poured in softly, and pulled out a small sketch pad for her daughter. "Draw me something peaceful," she whispered. Layla nodded and began sketching mountains and birds. A server passed by, offering champagne to a group of executives, then glancing at Cassandra and Layla without a word. The tray never tilted their way. Cassandra didn't react. She reached into her satchel, pulled out a bottle of water, and opened it herself. She had learned not to expect the same service. Not here, not ever. Across the lounge, a man chuckled audibly to his friend. "They really are letting anyone in here now." His tone was dismissive. Cassandra caught the glance. She caught them all. She always had. She chose not to react. Her father's voice echoed in her head. "Silence isn't weakness, it's control." And she needed control, especially today. Flight 482 wasn't just another trip. It was Layla's first time overseas. It was also the first vacation Cassandra had taken since resigning from her position as the ER director of Mercy General. After Marcus died, every hour had been survival. This trip was supposed to mark a new beginning. A fresh page could be stained by old ink. A low murmur began near the espresso bar. Cassandra glanced up to see another guest approach the receptionist, an older white man in a tailored navy suit. Marcy's posture instantly changed. Back straight, chin lifted, smile wide. "Welcome back, Mr. Hensley," she chirped. "As always, your favorite corner is ready." Cassandra watched silently as Hensley passed by her table. didn't even mask the disdain in his gaze. Layla looked up, confused. "Mommy, why are people staring at us?" Cassandra took a breath. "Because sometimes, baby, people don't understand what they're looking at." The loop began to close around them, soft, almost invisible, like a string drawn tighter with every glance, every paused conversation, every subtle gesture. And yet, Cassandra didn't shrink. She sat tall, shoulders back, her voice soft when she spoke to Layla, her presence a silent defiance. Minutes passed. The wait lingered. Then, just as Cassandra pulled out Layla's boarding pass to check the gate again, a sharply dressed woman in her late 30s approached another passenger, clearly irritated. "Excuse me," she said curtly. "I think you're in the wrong section. This lounge is for VIP and business travelers only." Cassandra blinked slowly. "And you are?" "Gold tier." Cassandra nodded calmly. "I see. Well, I'm a doctor, but today I'm just a mother taking her daughter on her first big trip. First class, just like you." The woman froze, uncertain how to respond. An awkward silence followed before she spun on her heel and returned to her seat, face flushed. A few eyes looked away quickly. A few others lingered longer this time, not in disdain, but perhaps uncertainty. A crack in the assumption, a small fracture in the comfort of prejudice. "Do you know what dignity is?" Layla smiled. "Like when you stand tall, even if others don't like it?" Cassandra nodded. "Exactly." And just as the words left her mouth, an overhead voice called for final boarding for Flight 482. Cassandra stood, took Layla's hand, and walked with her toward the gate, never once turning back to look at the room she'd just left. As Cassandra and Layla stepped onto the plane, greeted by the artificial warmth of cabin lighting and the two practiced smiles of the crew, she guided her daughter to seat 2A in first class. The seats were wide, leather-bound, with a glossed wood armrest between them and personalized screens folded neatly into the wall. Layla stared in awe, bouncing slightly in her seat as she gazed out the window at the bustling tarmac. Cassandra smiled softly, buckling her daughter in and tucking her sketchpad beside her before placing her satchel in the overhead bin. She sat down beside her child, exhaled slowly, and finally allowed herself to feel. This moment was supposed to be joyful, but the sour residue from the lounge still clung to her skin. She had thought it might dissipate with the shift in environment, but it hadn't. If anything, it was evolving, sharpening. A young flight attendant with auburn hair moved briskly through the aisle with a silver cart topped with porcelain cups and a steaming carafe, Earl Grey. She offered a warm smile to the elderly couple in front of them, pouring gracefully as she complimented the woman's brooch. She then stepped to the man across from Cassandra, a middle-aged financing judging by his Rolex and copy of Forbes, vivacy that she's serving royalty. But as she reached Cassandra's row, her expression shifted. Not a frown, not overt hostility, just absence. She skipped over the row entirely, not breaking stride, her cart wheeling past them as if the seats were empty. Cassandra blinked once, then leaned slightly into the aisle. "Excuse me," she called out gently. The attendant turned, brows lifting as if genuinely surprised to be addressed. Cassandra motioned toward the cart. "May we have some tea, please?" "Oh," she said, flustered but only mildly so. "I didn't think, well, I thought you might be in the wrong section. Sometimes we get missed seats." The tone was casual, like she was talking about a bag placed in the wrong overhead bin, not a human being assigned the wrong level of worth. Cassandra's smile was tight, but she kept her voice measured. "No, we're in the right seats, 2A and 2B. She gestured calmly at their tickets, still visible in the seat pocket. "I see," the attendant said after a pause. "I'll be right back." She moved quickly as though eager to leave their row behind, promising tea, but Layla turned her head toward her mother. "Did we do something wrong?" Cassandra reached out, smoothing her daughter's hair. "No, sweetheart, we didn't." She glanced briefly at the attendant now serving row 3. A brittle smile fixed on her face, but her hands betrayed a tremor. Cassandra knew it wasn't guilt, it was discomfort, the kind that came from having your internal bias exposed under a fluorescent lens. Before the tea could arrive, another interruption came, this one louder, uglier. A voice from across the aisle boomed, deliberately audible. "Excuse me, miss," the man with the Forbes magazine said, waving a head exaggeratedly at Cassandra. Before you get too comfortable. Cassandra turned her head slowly, eyes meeting his. He grinned a smug, performative grin, and added, "You do work for the airline, don't you? Or is this your first day?" A few chuckles rippled through the cabin, the kind that come not from humor, but from complicity. Cassandra didn't flinch. Her posture remained poised, her tone neutral. "No, sir. I don't work here. But I do hope someone from the airline wipes that down for you. Hygiene is important." The man's grin faltered, and another passenger, a woman in designer sunglasses 2 rows back, murmured, "Well said," under her breath. It wasn't support exactly, more like surprise that the target had replied without trembling. Layla, unsure, looked from the man to her mother, frowning. "Why did he say that, Mommy?" Cassandra leaned over and whispered, "Because some people think if you look different you must be here for a different reason." Layla nodded, absorbing the explanation like it was part of the boarding process. Cassandra wanted to cry at that, how fast her daughter was learning the rules of a world that still hadn't evolved. The flight attendant finally returned with 2 cups of tea, lukewarm now, and a sheepish smile. "Here you go," she said softly. Cassandra thanked her without emotion, accepting the porcelain with steady hands. The tea smelled stale. It didn't matter. What mattered was the silence that followed, the eerie stillness in their section of the plane. First class was supposed to feel exclusive, premium, but to Cassandra, it felt like a glass room where everyone could see her, but no one saw her as belonging. She sipped her tea, eyes scanning the cabin. Most passengers had settled into their routines, laptops open, shoes off, drinks in hand, but every few minutes one of them would glance her way, not openly hostile, not welcoming either, just curious, judgmental, unsure. She had become the anomaly, the flaw in their design, the misplaced variable. And then came another moment. A steward, not the attendant from before, but a male crew member in his early 40s, walked down the aisle. He glanced briefly at Cassandra, paused, then doubled back as if remembering something. "Ma'am," he said, "are you traveling alone?" Cassandra tilted her head. "I'm traveling with my daughter." She motioned to Layla, who looked up with a shy smile. "No other adults?" he pressed. Cassandra's eyes narrowed, not out of anger but alertness. "No." "Why?" The steward shrugged. "Just checking. We had a group issue on another flight recently, and your name didn't match the expected family roster." There was no roster. There was no reason, but Cassandra nodded calmly. "Well, if there's anything you need to verify, I suggest you speak with the gate. My information is all correct." He gave a tight nod and walked away, clearly unprepared for her firmness. As he disappeared toward the galley, Cassandra leaned back into her seat. Her tea had gone cold. The air felt thicker now, heavier. Every interaction had made it clear being seated wasn't the same as being welcome. A moment later, the man with the Forbes magazine let out a theatrical sigh and stood, walking down the aisle toward the restroom, passing Cassandra with a smirk. He said nothing. This time, he didn't need to. The message had already been sent. But as he passed, his phone buzzed and the screen lit up with a name Cassandra hadn't crossed her mind in years. Her gaze followed him as he turned the corner, her breath catching, not because she feared him, but because the loop was tightening, and the past had just taken its first step onto the plane. The moment Cassandra's eyes landed on the name glowing from the man's phone screen, Whitaker D., the chill crept down her spine, not from fear but recognition. She didn't know the man personally, but she knew the name. David Whitaker was a mid-level executive at Skylux's corporate office, someone she'd once encountered briefly during a medical consultancy project for the airline's in-flight emergency training program. She remembered him being dismissive, the kind who barely met her gaze even as he quoted her recommendations in board meetings as if they were his own. She tucked the moment into the back of her mind and focused instead on Layla, who was now coloring the mountains she had sketched earlier, with careful strokes of a green crayon. Cassandra brushed her daughter's cheek and offered a smile. But even Layla could sense the dip. "Is everything okay, Mommy?" she whispered. Cassandra nodded. "Just keep drawing, baby. You're doing great." Just as she settled back into her seat, a new presence appeared at the front of the cabin. A man in a dark suit with an earpiece clipped to his collar. He moved with the kind of careful authority that signaled he wasn't crew, but someone closer to enforcement. A Skylux security liaison, Cassandra guessed, though they rarely made appearances on flights unless summoned. He spoke briefly with the steward, who'd questioned her earlier, who gestured toward Cassandra's seat with a stiff nod. The man approached her row, leaned down slightly, and said in a voice quiet but firm, "Dr. Bell, I'm going to need you to step into the galley area with me. There seems to be a discrepancy in the passenger manifest, and I need to verify a few details." Calhoun turned toward him, calm but focused. "There's no discrepancy," she replied. "My ticket is valid. My daughter and I are seated exactly where we belong." The man maintained his rehearsed neutrality. "I understand. This will just take a moment. I appreciate your cooperation." Cassandra studied his face, weighing the cost of resistance against the fatigue of enduring yet another silent accusation wrapped in policy. She glanced at Layla. "I'll be right back," she said gently. "Keep drawing." The girl nodded solemnly. Cassandra rose, adjusted her blouse, and followed the man to the narrow space just past the first-class curtain. As soon as they were out of earshot from the rest of the cabin, he turned toward her, his voice clear. "Your name flagged a mismatch in the background verification database. It's probably nothing, but we were asked to clarify before departure." Cassandra arched an eyebrow. "I wasn't aware that paying customers needed background verification to fly." He shifted slightly, clearly uncomfortable. "It's a random check, ma'am, not personal." Cassandra didn't laugh, didn't even blink. "Everything about this has been personal." The man didn't respond. Instead, he tapped something into his tablet and waited. Just then, a second figure entered the galley, a tall woman with a tight chignon and a badge that read, Operations Manager L. Kinley. She didn't greet Cassandra, didn't smile, stepped between them with the energy of someone used to having the final word. "Dr. Bell," she said, her tone sharp but falsely courteous. "We've been notified that there may have been an internal error regarding your booking. Until we can sort this out, I'm going to ask that you relocate to the main concourse." Cassandra frowned. "You're asking me to deboard the plane?" Kinley shook her head. "Not exactly, but we'll need to move you to the terminal for a brief verification. It's standard when we have documentation mismatches, and unfortunately it's a step we can't skip." Cassandra took a breath, steadying her voice. "I'm traveling with my 6-year-old daughter. This is not standard. Is this targeted?" Kinley's expression hardened. "We're simply trying to avoid confusion, Drafts Bell. If you'd prefer, we can have a representative meet you at the security gate and explain—" "No," Cassandra interrupted. "I prefer the explanation here, in front of the people who decided I didn't look like I belonged." The security liaison shifted uncomfortably, but Kinley remained firm. "Look, let's not escalate this unnecessarily. You've clearly boarded under the assumption your ticket was processed correctly, but it's in everyone's best interest to resolve this outside the aircraft." Cassandra folded her arms, eyes narrowing just slightly. "And by everyone, you mean the passengers who feel more comfortable believing I'm the mistake." Kinley's voice dropped into a more clipped register. "I'm asking you one last time to cooperate, or I'll have to document this as a failure to comply with airline staff instructions." Cassandra nodded slowly, then smiled without warmth. "Go ahead, document it. Then let's see how your legal team handles a civil rights complaint mid-flight." That was when Kinley blinked, realizing she'd pushed too hard, too fast. The room hung in a silence both strained and electric. The security man cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should just check the manifest again, discreetly." But Kinley had already stepped forward, trying a new tactic. "If I do some things, Mr. Things happen when profiles don't align visually. You know how it is." Cassandra turned fully to face her. "I know exactly how it is. I've lived my whole life with people like you, explaining my existence as a profile mismatch." Her voice remained calm, almost clinical, but the truth behind her words cut sharper than any raised tone could. Before Kinley could recover, another voice joined them from behind, a familiar voice, though Cassandra hadn't expected to hear it again so soon. "What seems to be the problem here?" It was David Whitaker himself, freshly boarded from the gate and wearing the same smug confidence he'd had years ago. He looked at Kinley, then at Cassandra, and a glimmer of recognition flickered in his eyes, quickly suppressed. "Dr. Bell," he said with mock surprise. "I didn't realize you'd be traveling today." Cassandra offered a thin smile. Neither did your staff, apparently. David turned to Kinley. I know who she is. There's no issue here. Let him return to their seats. Kinley blinked, taken aback. But we had a mismatch. Let it go. Cassandra didn't thank him. She didn't need to. His intervention had nothing to do with justice and everything to do with damage control. Still, she turned, stepped out of the galley and walked back toward Layla with her head held high. As she passed through the curtain, conversations hushed, eyes flicked upward, and the silence said everything words could not. Layla looked up from her drawing, confused. Are we going home? Cassandra sat down beside her. No, baby, we're exactly where we're supposed to be. But even as she said it, she felt it unraveling again. Because just 2 rows behind them, a woman's voice had begun to rise, panic in her tone, as she called out for help. Something was happening in the lounge beyond first class, something that would soon change the entire course of the flight. As Cassandra settled back into her seat beside Layla, her daughter slid a fresh sheet into the sketch pad and began tracing the outline of clouds above mountains. The mood in the cabin had barely recovered from the confrontation in the galley. Though David Whitaker's intervention had diffused the direct accusation, the undercurrent of unease remained. Eyes still flicked her way, some curious, others cautious, yet Cassandra remained calm, her poise unshaken, her voice gentle each time she responded to Layla or adjusted the girl's seatbelt. The hum of the cabin grew louder as boarding finalized. Overhead bins clicked shut. The crew began their pre-departure checks. Then came the sound. Not a loud bang, not a scream, just a sharp thud just outside the first-class cabin. Conversations halted, chairs scraped. A woman's voice cracked through the quiet. Oh my God, Emily. Cassandra turned her head instantly. Her years in emergency medicine had trained her to hear panic before it had a name. The curtain separating the lounge from the first-class section fluttered open, and several heads turned toward the sound. Near the coffee bar, a small girl, maybe 7 or 8, lay collapsed on the floor, her arms twitching unnaturally. Her mouth foamed at the corners, her body convulsing violently. The passengers nearby leapt away in shock, knocking over cups, chairs, and phones in their scramble to move clear of her. No one moved forward. No one stepped in. The girl's mother, a tall blonde woman in designer travel wear, dropped to her knees, screaming, Emily? Baby, what's wrong? Somebody help! Her cries echoed, but no flight attendant appeared fast enough, and no one, absolutely no one, seemed to know what to do. Cassandra didn't hesitate. She stood. Her voice was steady, already calculating. Layla, stay here. She handed her daughter the sketch pad, locked eyes with her, and added, Don't move until I come back. Layla nodded, too startled to question. Cassandra moved down the aisle like a current cutting through still water. She reached the girl within seconds, already mentally assessing symptoms. Seizure. Likely tonic-clonic. Could be epilepsy, could be triggered by fever, stress, undiagnosed condition. None of it mattered right now. Ma'am, I need you to step back, Cassandra said clearly, kneeling beside the child and gently turning her onto her side, bracing the girl's head with her hand to prevent injury. The mother looked up, wild-eyed, still gripping her daughter's tiny wrist. Don't touch her, she shouted. Her voice was shrill, full of fear and reflexive distrust. Who are you? What are you doing? Cassandra didn't flinch. I'm a doctor, she said, eyes locked on the girl's quivering form. Voice as calm as it was commanding. She's having a seizure. I need to make sure she doesn't swallow her tongue or hit her head. Don't lie to me, the woman shrieked, trying to pull Cassandra's hand away. You're not with the airline, you were in the wrong seat earlier. Ma'am, Cassandra said, more forcefully now. Either let me help your daughter or move away. But do not get in my way. Passengers circled in a loose perimeter, some with phones raised, others murmuring in confusion, none brave enough to intervene. One man whispered, Is she even qualified? Another muttered, She was almost removed earlier. Why is she even near that kid? No one stepped forward. No one stepped beside the child. Cassandra ignored them all. Her focus was razor sharp, her hands steady as she guided the girl's body into a recovery position, checked her breathing, and began timing the convulsions in her head. 30 seconds. 45. A minute. Still twitching. She loosened the girl's collar and tilted her chin just slightly, noting the rise and fall of the chest. She was still breathing, labored but steady. The foam at her mouth was lessening. No cyanosis. That was good. She spoke softly, not to the girl but to the silence that surrounded them. She'll be okay, but I need emergency medics waiting when we land. She may need oxygen and a full neuro-evaluation. A flight attendant finally pushed through the crowd, pale and rattled. I've called the captain, she stammered. EMTs will meet us as soon as we touch down. Cassandra nodded. Good. We need to document her vitals every 5 minutes until then. Get me a cold compress. And find out if the mother knows her medical history. The mother, still frozen in place, looked as though her mind were catching up to reality in slow motion. She's had fevers before, but never this. Never this. Her voice cracked. What's happening to her? She may have a seizure disorder, Cassandra said gently, still monitoring the girl's muscle tone. But she's breathing now. She's going to be okay. Her mouth opened, as if the only person in the room who had acted. Her mouth opened, as if to apologize, then closed again. She didn't speak. Not yet. A young male flight attendant knelt beside Cassandra with a compress and a stethoscope. I don't know what to do with this, he admitted. Cassandra took it, her hands moving expertly, her posture never tense. Just stay here and watch her face. Let me know if she starts seizing again. The man nodded, wide-eyed. Cassandra glanced back and saw Layla peeking through the curtain, frightened but still in her seat. A subtle nod passed between them. Cassandra looked up and finally noticed the cabin had gone silent again, completely silent. The same people who had looked at her with suspicion 20 minutes earlier were now staring with wide, conflicted eyes. Someone whispered, "She really a doctor?" And then the little girl took a deep breath, coughed, and whimpered. Cassandra placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Shh, you're okay now," she murmured. "You're going to be just fine." The mother gasped and reached forward, pulling the girl into her arms. "Emily, baby, can you hear me?" The girl blinked, disoriented but responsive, controlled complete. She stood, slowly, knees cracking from the hard floor. For a moment, no one said anything. The crowd simply parted, instinctively, letting her through. She walked back down the aisle toward her seat, step by step, passing the same people who had looked through her minutes earlier. Their stares followed her, not with judgment now, but with shame. As she reached Layla, her daughter leapt into her arms and whispered, "I saw everything, Mommy." Cassandra held her tightly. "It's okay now." But her hands were trembling, not from fear but from the weight of holding back everything she didn't say aloud. And just as she tried to settle, another presence loomed at the edge of her vision, tall, composed, and somehow familiar. A passenger she hadn't noticed earlier stepped forward from the last row of foot. His voice was calm but commanding. "That wasn't just quick thinking," he said. "That was textbook ER protocol." Cassandra turned slowly to face him, the words hanging in the air like a spark looking for a fuse. Cassandra turned to face the voice that had broken the tension. The man was tall, early 50s, with salt and pepper hair and the effortless posture of someone used to commanding attention. He stood near the aisle, arms crossed, his tailored blazer hinting at both wealth and experience. "You've done this before," he said, more of a statement than a question. Cassandra met his gaze, her tone flat but steady. "Emergency medicine, 17 years. Pediatric trauma included." His eyebrows lifted slightly in acknowledgement. "Well then," he murmured, "I'd say the airline owes you more than an apology." Cassandra said nothing. She had learned long ago that acknowledgement rarely led to accountability. Just as she returned her attention to Layla, a commotion from behind the curtain broke the fragile quiet again. "He's not breathing," the girl's mother screamed. "Oh my God, she's not breathing!" The voice snapped everyone back into panic mode. Cassandra didn't hesitate. Her feet were moving before her brain caught up, muscles acting on instinct. She reached the lounge within seconds, pushing past the stunned crowd. The child's body was limp this time, lips beginning to turn blue, chest unnaturally still. Her pulse gone. The seizure had passed, but it had left behind a respiratory arrest. Cassandra dropped to her knees beside the girl, checked her airway with clear path, her voice cut through the chaos like a scalpel. "Someone bring me a defibrillator pack or AED if this plane has one, now." A flight attendant scrambled. The mother sobbed uncontrollably nearby, still unable to move, frozen in fear. A man from the back of the group muttered loudly, "Someone else should be doing this. Where's a real doctor?" Ignoring him, Cassandra locked her hands over the girl's sternum and began chest compressions deep, consistent, exactly 2 inches down, precisely 100 to 120 beats per minute. Her elbows didn't bend. Her rhythm was perfect. Her body moved like a metronome powered by purpose. She counted silently, focused entirely on reviving the small body beneath her. After 30 compressions, she tilted the girl's head again, pinched the nose, and delivered 2 sharp breaths into her lungs. Her chest rose and fell. Cassandra resumed compressions. No hesitation, no wasted motion. Around her, the room had fallen into a stunned hush. It was no longer chaos. It was a congregation of doubt watching congregations prove them wrong in real time. One of the men watching, dressed in golf attire with an expensive watch and a smirk he hadn't earned, leaned toward his neighbor and whispered just loudly enough, "What's next? She going to teach us on TikTok?" A few others chuckled, not from genuine amusement but from the discomfort of realizing that the narrative they'd built, the assumptions they'd clung to, were unraveling. Live, in front of them. Cassandra didn't even blink. She'd been in war zones, hurricane shelters, and inner-city ERs on a Friday night. Passive-aggressive sarcasm didn't rank on her list of threats. "If you're not going to help," she said without looking up, her tone cutting through the air like a scalpel. "Step back and shut up." The chuckles died instantly. The watch guy turned red and stepped away, suddenly fascinated with the floor. The little girl's chest convulsed. Cassandra paused compressions, placed her ear near the mouth, and listened. There it was. A whisper of breath. Faint, shallow, but real. "She's back," Cassandra said, more to herself than the crowd. The girl's eyelids fluttered. Cassandra wiped the foam from the corners of her mouth with a cloth handed to her by the scene. "Is she safe?" he asked quietly. "For now," Cassandra replied, "but she needs oxygen, fluids, and a full workup on the ground. This flight needs to land as soon as possible." Someone finally called the captain. The mother fell to the floor beside her daughter, holding the girl's hand with trembling fingers. "Thank you," she sobbed. I didn't know. I just thought." Her voice broke. Cassandra looked at her and nodded once, not coldly but not gently. "You're welcome," she said, and nothing more. The mother looked down, ashamed. Nothing now averted their eyes. Cassandra rose slowly, brushing her knees. Her breathing was steady, but her heart pounded in her chest. She had done what needed to be done, but the weight of being judged, until the moment she saved a life, it lingered. The man from earlier, the one with the commanding presence, stepped forward again. "Dr. Bell," he said, now addressing her with unmistakable respect. "I wasn't sure before, but now I know. You don't just belong here, you exceed it." Cassandra gave him a long look. "That's kind of you to say," she answered. "But that's not the point, is it?" He paused. "No," he admitted, "it's not." Behind them, a teenage boy who had filmed the whole thing with shaky hands put down his phone, stunned. "I thought she was just... I didn't think she was..." Hasana's seat assignment walked past slowly now, her eyes wet. A soft thank you on her lips. Cassandra offered nothing in return. Not from spite, just fatigue. She walked back toward Layla, this time with a different kind of silence surrounding her. Not rejection, not hostility. Reverence. Conflicted reverence. Layla reached for her mother as she sat down. "You saved her," she whispered. Cassandra nodded. "Yes," Layla asked. "But why did that lady scream at you like you were bad?" Cassandra looked down, brushing a curl from her daughter's forehead. "Because some people don't see who you really are until they're forced to." Behind them, the crew scrambled to prepare for an emergency landing, contacting ground medical teams. The flight had turned from routine to critical in a matter of minutes, and though Cassandra had restored one girl's breath, the air still felt heavy, like something else was coming. Because from the corner of her eye, she saw David Whitaker again, this time staring not with skepticism, but with nervous calculation. And he wasn't alone. A second man, sharply dressed and carrying a sleek corporate tablet, had just whispered something in his ear before both looked directly at Cassandra. And just like that, she knew the story wasn't over. It was only beginning to crack open. The silence in the cabin felt heavier than the aircraft itself as Cassandra returned to her seat, her breath finally slowing, her hands now stained with the invisible weight of what had just transpired. Layla wrapped her arms around her mother's waist, and Cassandra held her tightly, eyes fixed on the curtain she had just stepped through. She had performed a full-blown resuscitation in the middle of a luxury cabin, surrounded by people who had only minutes before questioned if she belonged there at all. The lights in the lounge had dimmed as flight crew scrambled to prepare for the expedited landing now being coordinated with air traffic control. Across the aisle, passengers whispered in hushed, reverent tones, casting sidelong glances filled not just with guilt, but fear of how easily they had misjudged her, and how powerfully she had corrected them without raising her voice. Then the emergency medical team arrived. The curtain flung open once more, and two onboard certified nurses, flown in as part of Skylux's executive protocol, stepped into the scene with red medical kits in hand and urgency in their eyes. Cassandra stood instinctively, stepping toward them and gesturing toward the child who now lay quietly, her color returning, breathing shallow but consistent. She's stable, likely post-ictal phase. I've done airway management, establish a rhythm of breathing. You'll want to monitor O2 saturation and check for any irregular heart rate intervals. The older nurse, a woman in her mid-40s with sharp eyes and coward hands, blinked at Cassandra, then nodded. "Are you medical?" she asked. "Emergency physician, pediatric trauma certified, Mercy General, Atlanta, former ER director." The nurse didn't ask for credentials. Her training told her what to trust, and she saw it in Cassandra's every movement. "Thank you," she said simply, and took over care without question. The second nurse confirmed vitals, pulse steady, oxygen saturation climbing, extremities warm. "She's out of danger for now." Relief rippled through the crew, and a few even clapped quietly in gratitude. The passengers, still unsure how to respond, remained frozen in awkward admiration. But then, a sharp voice broke through the stillness like glass on concrete. "No." It was the girl's mother. She had remained sitting against the wall during the entire exchange, arms wrapped around her daughter, her face pallid but her tone sharp. "No, this isn't over." Everyone turned toward her. She was shaking, her eyes darting from the nurses to Cassandra, then back again. "Who even gave you the right to touch my child?" Cassandra stared at her, disbelieving. "Excuse me?" The woman's voice rose. "I didn't give you permission. You're not a part of this crew. You're not registered medical staff on this flight. You assaulted her. That's unauthorized contact. I could sue you." Gasps fluttered through the cabin like sparks. A man behind Cassandra muttered, "She saved your daughter's life and you want to sue her?" Another woman whispered, "Is she serious right now?" The nurse looked visibly uncomfortable. The one monitoring vitals cleared her throat. "Ma'am, your daughter was in cardiac arrest. This woman's actions were textbook accurate. If not for her, we'd be working a fatality right now." But the mother's voice only grew more shrill. "I don't know who she is. She could be some TikTok self-taught faker or YouTube nurse. You don't just let strangers put their hands on children." Cassandra stood still, her spine straight, her face unreadable. "Ma'am," she said softly, "you asked for help. You begged someone to do something. I did. And I didn't do it for your approval. I did it for her." She gestured toward the child, now resting peacefully with a light blanket covering her. "I don't need permission to save a life. The law doesn't require it when seconds matter and a child is dying." The mother opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. Her lips trembled, but her eyes burned with something deeper than outrage, shame, refracted as indignation. Whitaker had stepped forward now, clearly watching the escalation with increasing discomfort. He whispered something to a stewardess, who then approached the mother and gently led her a few steps away to speak in private. Cassandra didn't watch them. She turned back to the nurses. "Let me know if you need anything else until we land." The older nurse placed a hand on Cassandra's arm and said, "You've done more than enough, doctor." Cassandra nodded once and returned to her seat, lowering herself slowly, as if only now feeling the weight of exhaustion setting in. Layla reached out, took her hand, and didn't let go. The cabin remained awkwardly quiet. The man with the expensive watch didn't meet her eyes. The tick-tock remark, once a cruel laugh line, now hung in the air like a curse no one wanted to claim. In the galley, the captain had requested to speak directly with Cassandra after landing. "Protocol," She wasn't sure if it would be for gratitude or legality or both. She was used to navigating that line. But what she hadn't expected was what happened next. One of the passengers, a woman in her late 60s, dignified in posture, dressed in a navy suit with a pearl brooch, stood and approached Cassandra's row. She spoke softly, clearly, every word deliberate. "I'm a retired ER nurse, 40 years. I've never seen anyone move like that without breaking a sweat. You didn't just save that girl's life, you saved our humanity, huh?" "Little bit," Cassandra looked at her, surprised. "And I think a lot of people on this plane have some thinking to do before they get off." The words echoed louder than their volume warranted. A few passengers shifted in their seats, visibly uneasy. Guilt was a quiet thing, but it dripped like water into places denial couldn't hold forever. Near the rear of the first-class cabin, David Whitaker adjusted his tie and tapped on his phone furiously, his jaw tight, clearly orchestrating something. The man beside him, still holding the sleek tablet, whispered again into his ear. Whitaker's eyes flicked toward Cassandra one last time, and for the first time since the flight began. There was something in his gaze that resembled apprehension, not fear, but the anxious knowledge that control was slipping away. Cassandra noticed, of course. She always noticed. She looked back only once, then turned to Layla and whispered, "Almost there, baby." But just as she reached for her daughter's blanket to tuck it over her legs, a soft alert dinged overhead, followed by an announcement from the flight deck that made every head in the cabin lift at once. The chime overhead echoed through the cabin, with that peculiar mix of calm and tension only airline announcements could achieve, followed by a clipped but composed voice from the cockpit. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to a medical emergency, we have coordinated with ground control for a priority landing. Emergency personnel will be waiting at gate B14. We ask that all passengers remain seated upon arrival to allow quick access for paramedics." The speaker clicked off, but the energy in the plane surged. Passengers whispered, some replaying the events in their heads, others still visibly shaken. Cassandra remained still, her hand resting lightly on Layla's shoulder. She felt the pressure of every gaze without needing to lift her eyes. She had performed under the spotlight before, operating rooms under fluorescent lights, war zone tents under battery-powered lamps, hurricane shelters with no lights at all. But this was different. These people hadn't asked for her help. They had questioned her right to be present, to exist in this space at all. And now they had to reckon with the truth they couldn't unsee. Then, as the plane began its descent and the cabin lights adjusted to landing mode, movement stirred at the front of first class. The curtain parted with practiced urgency, and in stepped a man wearing a white coat over civilian travel clothes, an airport badge hanging from retractable lanyard. His pace was brisk, his expression focused, eyes scanning until they locked on Cassandra. He stopped. His eyes widened, and then, in a voice clear enough for half the cabin to hear, he said, "Dr. Bell? Cassandra Bell? You're here?" The moment the name left his mouth, the space around them contracted. It wasn't just recognition. It was the weight of it, like someone had said Einstein at a science fair, or King at a protest. Even the mother of the sick child looked up, her hands tightening around her daughter. Cassandra looked up slowly, her eyes meeting his. A faint, tired smile touched the edge of her lips. "Drava Mires," she said, her voice cool but cordial. "Didn't expect to see you here." He laughed, short, breathless, stunned. "Neither did I. We were prepping to receive a pediatric seizure case when I saw your name on the flight log. I thought, no, it couldn't be. But it is." He stepped forward and offered his hand, which Cassandra heard. "You left Mercy," he said, "but I didn't know you were still working cases." "I'm not," she replied. "Today I'm just flying with my daughter." His eyes flicked toward Layla, who offered a small, polite wave. Then he turned back to face the stunned passengers and did something unexpected. He addressed the room. "For anyone wondering," he said, voice rising enough to carry, "this woman just saved a child's life at 35,000 feet. And she's not just a doctor. She's the reason hundreds of us in emergency response have jobs." There was silence, thick and total. He continued, warming with conviction. "Dr. Cassandra Bell was the coordinating lead for the Haiti relief response in 2019. When the quake hit, she mobilized 20 trauma teams in under 12 hours, personally oversaw triage for 3 field hospitals, directed 300 successful interventions, including a dozen pediatric resuscitations without stable power or oxygen. The silence shifted. It wasn't just a shock now, it was reverence. People who had smirked earlier now looked down at their laps. Those who had whispered slurs or assumptions were now blinking too fast, as if hoping this moment would pass before it etched itself too deeply into their shame. Guidanta turned back to Cassandra. "You haven't changed a bit," he said. "Still saving lives even when no one deserves you." Cassandra chuckled softly, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I didn't do it for them," she said. "I did it because a child needed me." Ramirez nodded. "Exactly why you'll always be 10 times the physician most of us could ever be. A stewardess, the same one who had watched from the shadows during the earlier confrontation, stepped forward now, holding a water bottle with both hands like an offering. I didn't know," she said quietly. "If I had, you shouldn't have to know," Cassandra replied gently. "You should just treat people like they matter." At that, the tension in the room finally cracked, not with applause, not with fanfare, but with stillness, a stillness that had been wrong. The mother of the child stood slowly, still holding her daughter's hand, and walked toward Cassandra. Her face was flushed, her mascara smudged, her voice trembling. "I owe you more than I can ever repay. I was scared. I reacted from fear, not truth. I didn't see you. Not really." Cassandra looked at her for a long, quiet second. "You saw me," she said. "You just didn't want to believe what you saw." The woman's eyes welled. "I'm sorry. For everything. I'll never forget what you did for my daughter." "Then teach her," Cassandra replied, "to be better than what we were in this room today." The mother nodded, tears falling freely. Somewhere behind them, the teenage boy who had recorded earlier lifted his phone again, but this time not to catch a scandal, but to remember a lesson. Even Whitaker looked as though he might speak, but the words didn't come. Cassandra turned back to Layla, who was watching everything with quiet wonder. "Mommy," she whispered, "you're kind of famous." "Baby just..." And from the corner of her eye she saw another steward, speaking quietly into his earpiece, his eyes wide, nodding, turning quickly to one of the pilots. Because as soon as the plane touched down, the moment would shift again. Not back into comfort, but into consequence. And the past that Whitaker thought he'd buried was already rising from beneath Cassandra's name. The wheels touched down with a sudden jolt, the kind that reminded passengers they had returned to Earth but were still suspended in the unresolved gravity of everything that had happened. The plane coasted to a smooth stop, the engines winding down as the cabin lights shifted once more, this time to their softest, almost ceremonial hue. A steward's voice came through the intercom, more nervous than formal. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Los Angeles. We ask that all passengers remain seated until medical personnel have completed their emergency assistance door." The doors had not yet opened, but the air inside had changed. Every soul on board knew that something had happened mid-flight that had nothing to do with turbulence and everything to do with conscience. Cassandra sat upright, her posture composed, her hand resting over Layla's as the child leaned quietly against her mother's arm. The mother of the little girl Cassandra had saved was now seated across the aisle, her eyes red, her breathing uneven. She had not said another word since Cassandra's final response, but there was movement just outside the door now, coordinated, urgent, a ground team of as the door hissed open and the first responders entered. A tall man in an airport security jacket stepped forward, flanked by a woman in a navy blazer, her ID badge glinting under the cabin lights. She wore a headset and held a digital clipboard in one hand. She didn't move like security, she moved like someone used to giving orders in rooms filled with noise. Her name tag read, Janine Holder, Terminal Operations Director. She paused just behind the EMTs, glanced briefly at the child being stabilized, and then turned toward Cassandra's row, her brow furrowing as her eyes landed on the woman sitting beside the child she'd been briefed about during descent. "Excuse me," Janine said, stepping forward and addressing the crew. "Who was this? The passenger who administered medical assistance during the in-flight emergency?" Several heads nodded. One steward pointed toward Cassandra. Janine's expression shifted from neutral to stunned. Wait, that's Dr. Cassandra Bell?" She didn't wait for an answer. She stepped closer, her eyes wide, breath catching slightly. I've read about you. Harvard Public Commencement 2020. You received an honorary degree for your trauma work in Haiti, right? Cassandra looked at her evenly, unsure if this was admiration or another interrogation in disguise. Among others, she replied calmly. Columbia and Stanford also conferred similar honors. The same. Janine let out a short, reverent breath. And you ran Mercy General's ER department during the 2021 surge? Cassandra nodded, her voice clipped but not unfriendly. Until I resigned in early 2023. God, Janine murmured, mostly to herself. I thought that was just a press legend. That Cassandra Bell. At those words, a ripple moved through the cabin again, one more damning than any tweet or camera flash ever could have delivered. The murmurs were no longer speculation, but realization. People began turning visibly in their seats. The man who had joked about TikTok earlier stiffened as if someone had called him out by name. The woman in the pearl gray pantsuit from the aisle, her face half turned, trying to disappear into the flight attendant who had skipped Cassandra's seat with the tea tray earlier, pressed herself into the galley wall, as if proximity to her mistake made it louder. And then came the moment that no one expected but everyone deserved. The security liaison from earlier, who had once walked Cassandra into the galley to verify her presence, who had repeated procedures like a machine, stood at the front of the cabin with his eyes fixed on her now, his posture rigid, his expression unreadable. When Janine Holder turned and quietly muttered something to him, his face changed, his hands twitched slightly at his sides. And then, in a motion that betrayed every ounce of his authority, he stepped backward, one foot, then another, as if distance might shield him from the weight of what he now understood. The cabin didn't clap, it didn't cheer. It held its breath, as if afraid that even oxygen would disturb the silence Cassandra now commanded. A man in business class 1 who had said nothing all flight, now leaned slightly into the aisle and spoke in a low voice. I can't believe she sat here in silence while we questioned her humanity. A middle-aged woman 3 rows back, who had earlier scoffed at Cassandra's presence, now wiped a tear from her cheek and didn't try to hide it. She saved that child, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Janine turned back to Cassandra. Dr. Bell, we have transport ready if you'd like priority deplaning. Cassandra gave a soft nod but shook her head. My daughter and I will wait for the cabin to clear. There's no emergency anymore. The authority in her voice made it final. Even the EMTs didn't argue. They offered a stretcher for the recovering child, who was now semi-conscious and responsive, then moved with precision toward the exit. Cassandra sat still, unshaken, letting everyone else fidget with their apologies and realizations. She knew this rhythm. The script didn't surprise her anymore. But what did surprise her was Layla, her little girl sitting up straighter, eyes bright with something like pride. Mom, she whispered, that lady said you were famous. Cassandra smiled softly, brushing her daughter's hand. Not famous, baby, just remembered now. Whitaker, who had gone silent for most of the last hour, stood near the rear of the cabin, visibly debating whether to approach. But Cassandra didn't look at him. Not yet. He wasn't part of this revelation. His moment was coming soon, but not in this silence. This was hers. The moment where the room, the institution, the airline, the eyes of all who once looked through her, were finally forced to see her. The woman, the doctor, the mother, the legacy. And just as she reached for her satchel beneath the seat to prepare for deplaning, another presence appeared in the doorway. A tall figure in a black blazer, badge gleaming, with an expression that said he wasn't there to congratulate anyone. The tall man in the black blazer stepped onto the aircraft with the quiet precision of someone used to dealing with escalations, his steps deliberate, his badge glinting under the overhead lights. His name tag read, Marcus Ellison, Regional Compliance and Ethics Officer, and the look in his eyes carried the weight of impending accountability. He paused just inside the cabin, surveying the space as one would assess the aftermath of a storm, not for damage control but for exposure. His gaze moved across faces, pausing slightly longer on those who instinctively looked away, as though guilt carried heat. Cassandra watched him silently, already knowing what his presence meant. Whitaker, who had hovered nervously near the rear of the cabin, took a single cautious step forward before Ellison raised a hand without looking his way, halting him mid-motion. We'll speak, Ellison said evenly, but not here. Then his eyes landed fully on Cassandra. "Dr. Bell," he said with measured clarity, "I'm here to formally initiate an internal inquiry regarding events that occurred prior to and during this flight. What you've endured appears to be not just unprofessional, but in potential violation of our non-discrimination code and FAA passenger protection regulations." Cassandra offered no expression. "That's your call to make. Mine was saving a child." Ellison gave a short nod, then gestured toward the open door. "We've also requested that Skylux management meet you at the terminal. There are matters that require face-to-face acknowledgement." Cassandra rose from her seat, gently guiding Layla ahead, as the passengers parted like water. No one dared make eye contact now. Not the flight attendant who had offered her cold tea, not the security liaison who had escorted her from her seat hours ago, not the passengers who once chuckled when asked if she belonged. As she stepped off the jet bridge, camera flashes did not meet her, nor reporters, only silence, and a group of uniformed staff standing tensely beside the glass wall of Gate B14. At the center stood a woman in her early 50s, shoulders square, hair tied tightly, her Skylux nameplate reading, C. Monroe, CI. Senior Operations Director. Monroe stepped forward, exhaling slowly as she spoke, with visible difficulty. "Draco Bell, on behalf of Skylux International, I want to personally and publicly apologize for what you experienced today. I've reviewed the mid-flight logs, listened to the internal crew audio, and spoken with our terminal team." She turned toward the surrounding passengers, her voice rising just slightly. "It is clear to me, and it should be clear to all, that multiple failures occurred. Not in our system, but in our people. People who acted from bias instead of protocol. People who judged without information. That is not acceptable, and it ends today." The passengers who had deplaned now gathered in a loose semicircle behind Cassandra, bearing witness. Monroe continued, her voice tightening with sincerity. "Effective immediately, an internal audit of the VIP lounge staff, gate agents, and in-flight personnel involved in this flight will be launched. I will oversee it directly. We will not allow Skylux reputation for elite service to become a shield for discriminatory behavior." Cassandra remained silent, her arms loosely crossed, Layla at her side. Monroe looked at her again, softer now. "You didn't just save a life today. You forced us to confront the truth about who we've let represent this brand." Her voice broke slightly at the end and she quickly recovered. "I won't ask you to forgive us, but I do ask that you let us make this right publicly, permanently." "Forget." Cassandra gave a single nod. "Start by listening to the people you've never heard of until it's too late." Behind them, a new disturbance rippled through the terminal. A voice rose sharp, entitled, echoing with disbelief. "This is ridiculous. I've flown with you for over a decade." It was the woman from the lounge, the one in the pearl gray suit who had whispered about Cassandra not belonging, who had made the first thinly veiled insult that morning. She was now arguing loudly with a gate agent who stood calmly but firmly. "Ma'am," he repeated for the third time, "your boarding privileges have been suspended pending investigation of your conduct during this flight." She scoffed, indignant. "I didn't touch her. I didn't threaten anyone. What are you accusing me of?" Another voice joined the conversation, deeper and sharper. A man in pilot uniform stepped forward, his captain's stripes gleaming. "We're not accusing you of anything, ma'am. We're making a decision. I'm the captain of your next flight, and I'm within my rights to deny boarding to any passenger I believe poses a disruption or violates our code of conduct." She blinked, stunned. "You're refusing me service?" "I'm refusing to elevate someone who behaves with open prejudice," he answered. "We don't fly racists. Not in my aircraft." The terminal fell silent again. No one stepped in to defend her. The woman, face flushed with disbelief, turned and stormed away, her carry-on wheels thumping angrily against the tile floor. Cassandra said nothing. Her silence was no longer quiet, it was doctrine. A few passengers clapped lightly, awkwardly. Others simply looked down, ashamed of how long they had stayed silent when they could have spoken sooner. Monroe took a step closer. "We've arranged a private vehicle to take you and your daughter to your next connection, or wherever you choose to go." Cassandra shook her head gently. "Special treatment. Just honesty. That's the only upgrade I want." Layla tugged lightly at her mother's sleeve. "Can we get a sandwich now?" Cassandra looked down, smiled faintly, and nodded. Yes, baby, you earned it. But even as they stepped toward the elevator, heading down toward baggage claim, Cassandra noticed Whitaker again, standing near the glass wall behind security. He wasn't speaking, he was watching, and now he wasn't just nervous, he was pale. Because he knew what was coming, because he knew what he had done, because somewhere in the folds of this unraveling story, the truth about his role hadn't yet come to light, and Cassandra hadn't said a word about it. Yet. As Cassandra and Layla exited through the quiet terminal corridor, the sterile glow of late afternoon sunlight filtering through the glass panels, the echo of the crowd's judgment and realization still pulsed behind them like a distant drumbeat. They walked not as victims but as survivors of truth, walking through the airport, not with power, but with peace earned in silence and shaped by scars no one else could see. Yet before they could reach the escalators to the lower level, a voice cracked through the stillness behind them, trembling and familiar. Dr. Bell, please wait. Cassandra stopped, her hand instinctively moving in front of Layla, shielding without threat, protecting without posture. She turned slowly, already recognizing the broken voice before seeing the face. It was the mother of the little girl she'd saved, the same woman who had, hours before, screamed at her not to touch her child, threatened legal action, and cast doubt louder than any injury could. But she was different now. Her pristine pearl gray pantsuit was wrinkled, her makeup had long melted into tear streaks. Her hands trembled as she stepped closer, holding nothing but a photo one of her daughters, Emily, smiling wide with a crayon in hand, the same drawing she had started before her seizure began. She didn't speak right away. She just looked at Cassandra like someone staring directly at the sun for the first time, unsure if it would warm her or burn her again. Then her voice returned, small but crystal clear. I was wrong, she said, her breath catching. I was everything you had every right to hate. Cassandra didn't move, didn't speak, but her eyes stayed locked, steady. You saved my daughter, she whispered, voice cracking. Not just with your hands, with your heart. You could have ignored her. You could have walked away. You had every reason to. But you didn't. She paused, searching for the right words, the weight of the moment threatening to break her open. I didn't just see a stranger on that plane. I saw my own ignorance, my own ugliness. And I judged you for existing outside of what I thought was possible. She fell silent for a moment, then choked out, if not for you. She wouldn't be alive, I know that. I know it every second now. Cassandra took a single step forward, still silent. The woman blinked through tears. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm not even sure I deserve it. I just need to say thank you. And I'm sorry. I was so wrong. For a long, quiet beat, nothing was said. Then Cassandra spoke softly, firmly. Thank you for saying that. It was not full forgiveness. It was not erasure. It was an acknowledgement. The woman nodded slowly, tears rolling freely now, and turned to Layla. Your mom is remarkable. Layla tilted her head and said, with the innocent wisdom only a child could possess. She's always been like this. Peterson spet. The woman nodded again, then turned and walked away, not redeemed, but changed. 1 year later, the screen faded in with soft piano music. A slate appeared. 12 months later. The frame shifted to a modest but busy community health center in downtown Atlanta, where volunteers sorted first aid kits, repacked oxygen masks, and carried defibrillators into trucks. A banner hung above the center's entrance, the Emily Bell Foundation, Emergency Response Outreach and Pediatric Aid. The woman from the plane, now dressed in a navy windbreaker and ponytail, addressed a group of young volunteers with a powerful clarity in her voice. This foundation isn't just about saving lives, she said. It's about unlearning the things that stop us from seeing the heroes in front of us, especially the ones we ignore. Is it true this was inspired by Dr. Cassandra Bell? The woman smiled. Yes, she saved my daughter's life, and she saved mine in a different way. The scene shifted again, this time to a classroom inside a local nursing college. Students sat attentively as a guest speaker addressed them, her voice nervous but hopeful. It was the lounge staffer from that fateful day, her hair tied back, her uniform replaced with nursing scrubs, and a lanyard that read, First Year RN Program, Mercy College of Health Sciences. She stood in front of the class, holding a microphone loosely, fingers trembling. Then I met someone who showed me it's about presence, empathy, and action. I judged her. I almost got her removed. And she taught me how to breathe into the pain and still do what's right. One of her classmates asked quietly, "What made you change?" The young woman smiled through the truth. Dr. Cassandra Bell. She showed me how to heal, not just with medicine, but with humanity. Back in the present, Cassandra sat quietly on a park bench beneath a tree in early spring, watching Layla ride her bike in the distance, laughter echoing through the fresh air. She sipped coffee from a plain white cup, her phone buzzing beside her with messages she didn't need to open. She had nothing to prove, no name to defend. She had lived the storm and walked out carrying more than victory. She carried clarity. As Layla circled back toward her mother, Cassandra smiled, stood, and opened her arms. The girl ran straight into them, full speed, fearless. Cassandra lifted her gently, spun her once, and whispered into her daughter's ear, "Let's go home." Then, as they walked off together under the setting sun, a final line faded onto the screen. Justice doesn't need to be loud. It only needs someone quiet enough to stand firm against injustice, and strong enough to heal even those who once caused them pain. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more powerful, true-to-life stories that remind us what courage, dignity, and justice really look like. What moment in Cassandra's journey hit you the hardest? And where in the world are you watching from right now? Drop your thoughts in the comments, we read everyone.